A long time ago, Earth underwent dramatic changes. This period, known as the Triassic, marked a significant turning point in the history of life on our planet. It was the period of early dinosaurs. The Triassic lasted from around 252 to 201 million years ago. It started after a catastrophic event known as the Permian-Triassic extinction. This event was one of the worst things to ever happen to Earth. It wiped out up to 90% of all species. This completely changed the planet's ecosystem and led to the disappearance of coal for millions of years. But at the same time, it was the opening act for many famous groups of animals that would eventually become the kings and queens of Earth for millions of years. It was like a bridge connecting two eras. The late Paleozoic era, where most creatures resemble mammals and reptiles, and the Mesozoic era, with archosaurs and dinosaurs. Now imagine that you suddenly found yourself in the Triassic period. Welcome to the world of ancient creatures. The Earth looked very different back then. All our continents formed one giant landmass called Pangaea. And since all countries and continents were joined together, the Earth was a bunch of beautiful, varied landscapes. Some parts were lush with towering conifer forests, while others were dry deserts and open prairies. But the plants weren't like the ones we have today. Instead of flowers, you would see an abundance of conifers and ferns, forming vast forests and fern prairies. These forests were home to diverse forms of coniferous trees. Some of them were reaching heights of up to 100 feet. It would be unlike any forest you've ever seen. As you keep exploring, you'd notice strange ancient creatures. Mammal-like reptiles like Lystrosaurus would roam the land. In the skies, the first pterosaurs, the earliest flying vertebrates, would be soaring above you with their long jaws and tails. And amphibians, like the large temnospondyls, thrived in the water. You'd also see the first marine reptiles that would fill the ocean soon. Reptiles dominated in this world, but the early ancestors of mammals were also there, hiding in the shadows. Maybe you'd be able to spot them somewhere. But what makes this time truly fascinating is the rise of the dinosaurs. Around 240 million years ago, the first dinosaurs appeared. They weren't as gigantic as we know them, though. They were small, swift creatures. Okay, so let's say you found yourself among all these giant beasts. You have nothing but 2 bottles of water with you. What are you gonna do? Your fate highly depends on where exactly you are. Pangaea was enormous. It was all continents united into one after all. So if you were unlucky and landed in the heart of the desert, you'd face extreme aridity and scorching heat. Some of them were even bigger and hotter than the Sahara. On some sides of the deserts, there were towering supercontinental mountain ranges, even taller than the Himalayas. So not only would you end up in a desert, it would also be almost impossible to escape. In that case, having only 2 bottles of water with you would be very unlucky. But don't give up yet. You could find some oases with lush vegetation in these arid regions. Just scan the landscape for areas with more plant life or bird activity. But even if you end up in some forests, you'd have to ration your water wisely and treasure every sip. Finding something to drink in the Triassic period would be quite a challenge. Back then, just like today, rivers and streams would be reliable sources of fresh water, so you'd have to look for signs of flowing water, like following the sound or looking for places with animal tracks and more plants. You could also collect rainwater. It would be even cleaner than the ones in the rivers. You could do that using some self-made containers, leaves, or improvised catchment systems. Or if you had some basic tools, you could try digging into the ground. Just look for damp soil or signs of moisture seeping up from below the surface and keep digging deeper until you reach something good. There are also options like extracting water from plants, gathering morning dew from leaves, exploring caves, and so on. Just make sure to filter and purify the water before drinking it, no matter where it's from. Since there's no coal, as we mentioned before, you could filter it with sand, leaves, and stuff like that. You'd also need to find a safe spot to rest, which would be very difficult. As you can guess, there were tons of deadly creatures in this period. For example, Titanopteran insects and gigatitans. These massive insects, some as large as 1.4 feet, possessed sharp features on their exoskeletons. They could easily harm a human. Good for us that they're not around anymore. There were also apex predators like the pseudosuchians and temnospondyle amphibians. These crocodile-like creatures, some much larger than a human, were experts at hunting and survival. Encounters with them would likely be fatal. You would have to be super careful and stay away from any large, hungry creatures. You also have to find a way to build a shelter. You might use leaves, branches, or whatever else you could find in this world. Alright, let's say you built some shelter and can go to sleep now. The length of the day during the Triassic period was less than 23 hours. It's shorter than what humans are adapted to, and although it doesn't seem like much, it would cause some serious disruptions to your body's internal clock. Over time, this could lead to adverse effects on your health and lifespan. It would be quite hard to adjust, but you'd probably manage. Next day, the search for food begins. Here's a new problem for you. The oxygen levels in the Triassic atmosphere were lower than what we have today. In some areas, it might have been as low as 12%, compared to 21% in today's world, which means that starting a fire for warmth or cooking would be impossible. Fire requires a higher oxygen level, like 15 or 16% of oxygen. You can say goodbye to warmth or delicious meat. And of course, even breathing itself would be quite difficult. You'd probably feel like you're in some high mountains all the time and get tired quickly. Good luck running away in case of danger. So, how do you find food? Well, while the Triassic lacked flowering plants, there were still some types of primitive plants. You might be able to eat some leaves, stems, and roots. It wouldn't be very nutritious or tasty, and there's no way for you to know which ones are toxic. Basically, each meal would be a gamble. But hey, you can also eat insects. Can you imagine trying to capture and eat a gigatitan? That's quite a horrifying idea. But you don't have to eat giant insects. You could also forage for some beetles, grasshoppers, or ants. Or maybe some small reptiles and amphibians, like Lystrosaurus. And since there's no fruit in the Triassic, that means you have nothing to get this sweet vitamin C from. That could lead to some serious health concerns. In order to prevent that, you'd have to eat stuff like fish eyes, bark teas, or plain leaves. Good luck with all that. As you can see, all your chances of survival are very slim. But who knows, maybe as the days go by, you'll be able to adapt to this ancient world. Learning is one of humans' greatest strengths. So perhaps you could learn from all the creatures around and the environment. You'd become a true explorer, studying the plants and animals to find out what's safe to eat and what's not. What a great test of your wits, resourcefulness, and resilience. But I'd still prefer to stay at home if I were you.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.